Everybody, and welcome to this City Planning Committee meeting. I'd like to advise that this is being live streamed and ask that elected members here turn off their mobile phones or switch to silent. I'd just like to acknowledge that it's NAIDOC week, and also acknowledge that in recognition of the deep history and culture of this place, Hobart, Nipaluna, I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which the city of Hobart was built. I acknowledge the determination and resilience of the Palawa people of Tasmania, Lutruwita, who have survived invasion and dispossession, and who continue to maintain their identity, culture and rights. I recognise the value of continuing Aboriginal knowledge and cultural practice, and pay my respects to elders past and present. To the agenda, we have nobody to co-opt, I don't think, but we have everybody here: Alderman Briscoe, Councillor Harvey, Alderman Barakis, Councillor Dutta, but not Councillor Coates. Do we have an apology from Councillor Coates? No, so I expect that he might still be coming. Nobody to co-opt. Item 2 is confirmation of minutes. Thank you, Alderman Barakis. So that's from the 20th of June. Any discussion? If not, I'll move that. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Items carried. Item 3 is consideration of supplementary items. I don't think we have any. Item 4 is indications of pecuniary and conflicts of interest. Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Chair. 7.1.1.
Thank you. Okay, any other conflicts of interest? No? All right. Item 5 is transfer of agenda items. Wish to transfer anything? No. We'll go to Planning Authority items, consideration of items with deputations, and we do have some. Welcome, Councillor Coates. Can I have somebody move that, please, that we hear the deputations first? Councillor Dutta, thank you. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Items carried. Item 7, we're committee acting as a planning authority, and we go to the only item tonight, 7.2.1, which has a deputation. So that's under the City of Hobart Interim Planning Scheme to 816 Sandy Bay Road, Sandy Bay. Change of use to visitor accommodation, and we have 2 representatives to hear from, and we'll begin with you, Mr. Mannon. Welcome. On Zoom, and your time starts now for 5 minutes, and then we'll ask any questions if the committee has any. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor Helen. I've read with great disappointment, I guess, the findings of Council with relation to the recommendation of approval of visitor accommodation within the application. I'm representing tonight Miss Helen Gray and also Ms Marilyn Pennington-Smith, who unfortunately can't be on screen with us. But our properties are immediately adjoining, and I understand that 5 of the 6 councillors that sit on the Planning Committee have attended site visits, so understand the implications of the approval of visitor accommodation on our 3 premises. I draw your attention to page 175, where Council actually understand that and acknowledge that Mr Shane Farmer, or the applicant, has been carrying on business in a premises that has no relevant permit at the time. The Council themselves have said this: it is acknowledged that there appears to be a history of the site being used without a permit and in a manner that has been alleged to have caused detriment to the amenity of surrounding residents. That the Council has commenced enforcement action against the property owner for operating without a permit. They've attributed this primarily to a lack of poor management by the owner. I fail to see, and the residents that I represent fail to see, how we can actually hold the applicant accountable when it's very clear that there's a history that he's operated in contravention to the planning laws. and to suggest that we need to put in a stricter management or a visitor management action plan doesn't go far enough to protect the amenity of the immediately adjoining residents, and we request council to exercise its right to reject the application in front of you. To suggest also that we deal with this through an enforcement mechanism under a visitor management action plan does create a lot of work for both council and the residents, when it's very clear, to the surprise of all of the surrounding residents, the quantity of the applications that have been put forward to council. Mr Farmer has received essentially support to operate commercial premises on all of our doorsteps, and creating all of us a significant concern.
Do you wish to say anything else, or shall I open it for questions?
Open it to questions, please.
Okay.
Helen, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. All right. So, are there any questions from the committee? We'll start with you, Councillor Harvey.
I'm just wondering how long's this been going on for? You might have said, but I've missed that detail. How long have you had issues with the neighbours with this Airbnb short stay?
We put in a Section 63B application to council, which shows a history of evidence going well beyond the period of 2 years now. The things like parking, etc. We've submitted photographic evidence that, at times there's been between 7 and 8 cars parked there. So you can imagine the traffic noise, etc. it's causing on adjacent residences.
And how far is the premises from your place?
The parking area is about 10 metres from my living area. It's probably about 5 metres from Helen Gray's bedroom, and about 15 metres from Miss Marilyn Pennington-Smith's premises.
And final question, and you don't think it can be managed, you don't have any confidence it can be managed with a management plan?
Not given the history that we've outlined in the 63B notification, which shows an extended period of engagement to directly pull the neighbourhood together to cooperate with the applicant. Those measures have failed. The only avenues left open to us now is through the enforcement, which includes reports to police.
Okay, thank you.
And to council as well.
Let's go.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I think I was one of the people that have come down to see the situation from your property, Cedric. So the residents that the applicant is trying to change to visitor accommodation, what has that been used prior to the visitor alleged illegal visitor accommodation? Was it a family home, or is it a family home, or do you know?
It was a family home that belonged to a colleague of the applicant, where there was two young boys, a mother and a family of 4 essentially. For the period of time that the applicant lived there without it being an Airbnb, it was quite a peaceful neighbourhood. The impact to us has been immeasurable.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Dutta?
Thank you, Chair. Just a further question with regards to the management plan. Have you reported this to the police or to the council staff with regards to the disturbances?
We have now. There is a ongoing compliance matter referenced in the documentation here that is going through a separate council process. We've reported disturbances to the police, and most of our neighbours have at times call council for advice on, what's the best opportunity for us to actually have this tended to.
Just a follow-up question, Chair. So how many times have you reported this? How often has this happened?
The history of this goes back about 2 years. It's infrequent, but when it is there, it's real for us. So we've reported it to the applicant himself, and it's only in recent times we felt the level of comfort to actually report it to the police, because we didn't understand the applicant's connections in the community, and what it might potentially mean for us as a result of reporting it either through the police or justice channels. So I guess there's a history of under-reporting, because we were all concerned about what this might mean for our safety.
Thank you. Alderman Barakis.
Yeah, thank you. Can you speak a bit more? I know there were some comments about loud parties, comments about, as you just sort of said, about police involvement. Because it's a relevant part of the planning scheme provisions for short stay, about noise. So I know you spoke a bit about the parking issues, but can you speak about the noise impact of guests themselves and the parties and entertainment that was suggested in the report?
Look, Claire Ellis and Anthony Ellis would be better to comment on this, because they bear the brunt of it. But just to say that there are people urinating off balconies, there's loud, abusive, obnoxious yelling, there is curt remarks, there is drunken behaviour, throwing of beer bottles, nudity, sex, and other substances being, passed around at this party. So it's not the type of neighbourhood that I subscribed to being in when I moved here. That's on our doorstep now.
And it is, sorry, follow up, Chair. Yes. And it is a house that lends itself more to an entertainment. Is that was suggested? It does lend itself more to an entertaining style of accommodation, as opposed to people rock up and spend the night and then wake up and go about their business.
Yeah, look, it is a part. We refer to it as the party household. It has become very much that. Claire and Anthony, and also Marilyn and Helen are right on the doorstep. We're diagonally opposite, and we still cop a lot of the noise and the behaviour and noise, sound and light pollution as well.
Okay, thank you. All right, if there are no further questions for Mr Mannon, thank you. And we'll now go to Ms Claire Ellis. Thank you, Claire. You have 5 minutes, and if you can make other points, which might be relevant. Thank you. You just need to take yourself off mute.
I've got myself off. Thank you for that. You've got our written application, and I won't repeat it, but I'll pull out a few points to argue why we believe you should reject this application. And we've been working closely with our neighbours and discussing some of the different impacts we all have and some of the commonalities. You're considering granting a permit to a person who's already demonstrated, already blatantly has disregarded your council rules and regulations. He already has a history of not acting lawfully in relation to the property in terms of operating without permits, and has no likelihood to meet your requirements in the future, as it's not in his financial interest to do so. It's been seriously and significantly creating a proven unreasonable loss of residential amenity, and your possible permit approval with conditions we don't consider will mitigate or minimise the negative impact on us and a whole cluster of us as residents. We all have different impacts because we physically live in slightly different locations to it. As neighbours, we've already had a couple of years of trying to have this property managed. We felt in appropriate ways by discussion with our neighbours, etc. And according to the required visitor behaviours that the host or the owner themselves put on the visitors, It's failed multiple times, and the list of documented cases we sent in with our submission isn't all of them. It's just the ones we noted after the issues just kept coming and coming and coming at us continuously, that we've had to up the ante on the whole process. So we've proven to ourselves that a visitor management system put in place and managed by the owner or the host is not a successful technique to manage this particular property. We're not making comments about other ones, it's only about this one. So we believe the council putting a visitor management plan in place will be equally ineffective. The council has no real capacity to supervise, manage or ensure the terms of the visitor management plan are going to be met. If you do approve it and then try and prosecute him for breaches, we need a really, really tough and tight visitor management plan with conditions and a clear definition about what breach is. And also who will enforce it. You know, as neighbours, we have to call the host, which is usually proven to be an unsuccessful approach. So if it's your management plan, do you provide the hotline for us to call when breaches arise, and do you deal with it at 1 a.m. or at 3 in the afternoon? What's actually happened is the advice we've had from everyone, including Airbnb, is that we have to call the police. So the police resources are being spent on managing Airbnb parties. Secondly, as council, you have a record that you haven't been able to deal successfully with this owner already. You've been recalcitrant and in breach of your own requirements, and you have enforcement issues with him already. So, and yet you're looking to approve a permit with conditions that we consider he won't comply with, and we don't think you would consider he would either. And it's not in his interest. It's an investment house. He's moving to live in Sydney. It's purely run as a commercial return. Under Airbnb, the more people he has in it, the more money he makes. So it's not in his interest to limit those things. The more the visitors enjoy themselves, the greater time they have, the greater financial return over time he gets. And it is an entertaining house. It's there and it's rented for anniversaries, birthdays, weddings. We've had all of those there multiple times. Can be on a Tuesday, can be on a Thursday. About every 3 days it turns over. Some people are absolutely fine, but plenty are really noisy because they've come to have a great time and to enjoy themselves, put on their stereo speakers outside by the pool area. Things like noise detectors do not work, and the whole of the neighbourhood honestly wears the impact of this. It's also 4 bedrooms, in the past been advertised able to take up to 13. Your own document shows that the garage is now being converted to a dwelling, and the house above it, Unit 1, 816, already has a visitor accommodation permit owned by the same owner, currently being expanded to add another bedroom, so we'll have an 8-bedroom site. And so he's running rings around us in terms of your processes and clearly building a default motel. And it's not a usual visitor, short-term visitor plan request, we believe. It's a backdoor commercial development, and bluntly it shows developers how to get around the council system. He doesn't care about the legal requirements of a management plan, and he's already shown this by acting for several years without a permit. Even Airbnb has delisted him as a permitted host, as he didn't meet their requirements.
Would you like to sum up? We're just running out of time. Thank
Sure.
you.
We appreciate you have a limited capacity under the planning laws, but we do not see that approving this permit is outside your ability. And in fact, you need to stop it continuing and going ahead further and put the onus on him to show how he is going to meet all these requirements, rather than approving it and giving him permission to just keep going ahead as he has been for the last few years.
Thank you. I just want to start with a question first. So you're suggesting, which I think you are, that these 2 sites are, you know, the front building house,
yep,
and the back are used at the same time by the same, like advertised at the same time. Right,
so maybe potentially he can list them separately, but they're clearly shown in a geographic map as next to each other, and it's the one owner. So they can be rented out together, and there's actually now with the garage as well, there's an additional dwelling in there.
Thank you. All right, I'll open it to the committee for questions. Councillor Harvey?
So is this affecting your sleep and your mental health as well?
Very, very seriously. There is no usual pattern to this. So for us, when we go to bed, we may go to sleep and then get woken up at 1 in the morning, 3 in the morning. We don't know what we're going to have next door. Every time we come home, we're at our limits in terms of having to live next to it.
And what's the frequency of this?
It completely varies. It can happen twice in a week if there's a major party. We can have nothing for a couple of weeks. It just depends on who's actually rented it. But increasingly the renters were around birthdays, anniversaries, celebration, because it's a house that suits itself to that type of, for somebody wanting that sort of circumstance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? No further questions? Okay, thank you very much. Now we'll go to the applicant's representative, Mr. Sam Linden.
So firstly, I am representing Shane. I'm speaking on his behalf, but I'm not representing him by any means.
And my apologies.
He's asked me to come and have a chat to you because since April I've been the actual property manager for his property, and he wanted me to explain to you that he has put in a number of measures that we've discussed, and I have discussed with his neighbours as well. I've had an hour and a half meeting with Claire and her husband, Anthony, and so we've discussed with them what measures that we're going to put in place. So I've been managing it since April, and since that time we've reduced the number of guests allowed in the house from 13 to 8. We've also installed a noise detector in the pool area, which alerts my phone if there's any noise for a consistent period over the decibels outside the noise restriction times. There's only parking for 2 cars in there. It's not possible to get 7 cars in that driveway. I drive in and out of that all the time. Prior to my taking over the management, Shane was not, I believe, in breach of his council permit. He was actually living in the house for a while, but and only renting the house out when he wasn't in the house, so he was using this home sharing exemption. Since I come on board, I misunderstood and I used his planning permit on the Airbnb listing that I set up. So that was my error, not his. That's since been changed because he still is flying in and out of Tasmania in relation to that house. So they're probably just some of the points that I wanted to make. So the property is listed only on Airbnb, and Airbnb have strict no party rules. So they actually vet guests as well as on top of what I do as vetting guests. So I always ask them what they're there for. So we do everything in our power to prevent parties. Yes, it does have an outside pool on the waterfront, so it can be noisy out of times, but guests are told strictly during what times they're not to be making a lot of noise, and I can monitor that with the noise detector.
Is that all you want to say?
That is, yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm not getting the intonations very well. We'll start with you, Councillor Dutta, then Alderman Barakis for questions.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to get a clarification on this. So the applicant does not live there permanently, is that correct?
Correct. So he's in and out of Tassie, travelling between Tassie and Sydney as far as I'm aware.
But I just want to clarify again that he does not live there permanently. To travel in and out is a different point. He does not live there permanently.
I'm not really sure of his personal circumstances, but it's not available for rent all the time. So he's using it himself as well.
Any further questions, Councillor Dutta?
Thank you.
Alderman Barakis?
Thank you, Chair. And through, just on the topic of the noise and the party house status, because that's something that we just heard from the previous 2 deputations. So you've got the detectors to pick up when this is happening. Has this happened? I suppose has it happened on a regular basis there? Have measures been taken to stop it once that's happened? And was this put in after having numerous complaints for this sort of thing?
No. So I took over management of the property in April, and as part of What I do as part of my service is I put those noise detectors in every house that's in a suburban area, and to date I've had no reports of excessive noise or parties in that house.
Okay.
And Ms. Linden, you're aware of the Section 63 that had been lodged in relation to this, or was that before you started managing the property?
So I don't know what the Section 63 notice was.
Thank you. Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sam. Just to clarify, you're not running it as through the platform Airbnb. You're running it separately.
Sorry, no, we're only running it through Airbnb. It's only listed on that platform.
Oh, right. Thank you. Just one more question, Chair. I thought the Airbnb rules was no parties is a rule.
That's correct.
Yep, thank you.
They have a strict no party policy, and they've actually tightened that up in the last few weeks as well.
Councillor Coates?
Look, thank you. Question through you, Chair. Sam, thank you very much for that. Just confirming, at the moment, obviously, it's on, as you just said to Alderman Briscoe, it's on Airbnb only. I mean, do you have any intention, obviously with home time and running your professional business, of putting this property on other platforms or advertising in any other way?
It is my understanding that Home Time do have intentions to multi-list their properties, but at this present time they're Airbnb's preferred supplier, so they're only able to be listed on Airbnb, but I understand there are plans afoot to multi-list on other online travel agents.
Thank you.
So who was that, sorry? The applicant?
No, sorry, that's the company that I work for, Home Time.
Oh,
the management company.
Thank you. I see. Right. Thank you. Any further questions? No. Thank you for speaking to the committee, and I'll now open the item for discussion. Councillor Dutton.
I was going to foreshadow a motion, so I'll leave it until we're ready instead of asking the question. But I do have a foreshadow motion.
You don't?
Yeah.
Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, look, I'm going to move a motion for refusal. I wonder if we've got some conditions for refusing. I think this is a situation which is not the normal run-of-the-mill short stay accommodation applications that have been flooding into us because of the possible change of amendment. This one is clearly a nuisance to the neighbourhood, changes the residential amenity of the neighbourhood. It has, and I've been on site a few months ago with a couple others. I think it was Councillor Coates and I were at the property, and I think the residents there have a very, very good case for this to be rejected. So could we ask the Director, I move for refusal and appropriate conditions.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, as a question too?
Thank you, Alderman Briscoe. Yes.
Yeah, look,
I get that. Thank you.
Sorry,
Yes.
yes, we'll prepare some conditions consistent with the discretions that are afforded in this instance.
Thank you.
Primarily around those amenity concerns that were raised.
Good, thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm just looking at 6.7.4, the performance criteria. P1 to clause 3.1E provides the following.
What page is that?
Page 165 and 66. Visitor accommodation must be compatible with the character and use of the area, not cause unreasonable loss of residential amenity, having regard to A, the privacy of adjoining properties, B, any likely increase in noise to adjoining properties, C, the scale of use and its compatibility with the surrounding character and uses within the area, D, retaining the primary residential function of an area, E, the impact on the safety and efficiency of the local road network, and F, any impact on the owners and users' rights of way. So I would have also moved for refusal if Alderman Briscoe hadn't have done so. And I think Alderman Dutton was doing it as well, but he put up a foreshadowed rather than the alternative motion, but I'll be supporting the motion for refusal. I think this does have a huge impact on the neighbours, and I would hate to be in the situation of living next to uncertainty of the dwelling, where you never know what sort of neighbour or what sort of noise or what sort of events will be happening next door. And I do hear what Miss Sam Linden said. However, I have much more concerns for the neighbourhood in this area and the people who live in the adjoining houses, and I think we need to respect their right to peaceful, coexistence in the neighbourhood, and I will be supporting the foreshadowed motion for refusal. Sorry, the motion for refusal. And I'm just looking here at, and like I said, it's 6.7.4 performance criteria. Would that be one of the main reasons, through you, Chair, to the Director?
Yeah, that's correct, Chair.
Further comments? Alderman Varakis?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, just on that and 6.7.4, I know Part B, the likely increase in noise to adjoining properties, is a reason that gets brought up by elected members for refusal of short stay permits quite often, and it's one that I am usually quite critical of, because I think it's often quite an unfair assumption to make. But I think in this particular instance, I don't think it's an unfair assumption to make. In fact, I don't think there's a likely increase in noise to adjoining properties. I think we have an actualised, perceivable increase in noise. So I'm just curious, because I'll be supporting Alderman Briscoe's motion. I think this is one that isn't a normal application. It's one that sort of clearly, I know there's supposedly a policy against party houses, but it does, you just look at the place and it looks like a party pad. And hearing that there's loud parties occurring there outside of the pool is the least surprising thing, looking at the site. In the officer's report, I'm just curious, through you, Chair, why, with everything that we've heard about there being complaints, there being issues with police, with loud parties, why that hasn't been considered more?
Yeah, look, it's a fair question. I suspect the officers in this instance have been satisfied that the management regime proposed to be put in place would afford sufficient protection for adjacent residents, as they rightly deserve, but acknowledge that there's clearly prior history on this one, and therefore there is, as we've heard tonight, there is that concern that the form of this owner is not a positive one so far as addressing these matters. But the officers have clearly been cognizant of the new management approach, and were reasonably satisfied that if implemented appropriately, would satisfy those concerns.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I think, and I know there's been some comments made, and I've had phone calls about the owner itself, and I think it's important that we steer clear of that. But when we do have, it's not speculation to say that this is having on neighbouring houses, on their amenity, not just the parking, but especially the noise and the party houses. So look, I think it's a pretty clear to me, and I think it seems to be clear to everybody here, that this is just one that's not appropriate. I know we have an item on the short stay issue later on tonight, but I don't think this is. I think this is a special case in that it's just clearly inappropriate.
Thank you. Further comment? Councillor Dutta?
Just a question through you to the Director. So the staff has recommended this as approval. My question is, the facts that given to you are the same facts given to us, and the fact that the staff are satisfied that they recommend approval was not based on assumption, is it, as suggested, with regards to the noise aspect on that particular clause, A to F?
Yeah, well, that's correct. The officers have concluded that there's sufficient evidence to suggest that they could comply with that, and that's why they've made that recommendation.
Thank you.
The alternative views in this room.
Sure. Thank you so much. And that's the point I want to make. You know, the staff have come to us with a recommendation based on the evidence that they have, the objective facts that they have, and the same clause that we are looking at. Tonight, we are seeing it differently, even though the professional staff has recommended to us an alternative to approve. And I would support this motion because, in my view, using my own discretion and judgment, that it does not satisfy or comply with the particular clause that we have referred to. And furthermore, in my view, it does not comply with the layout of the parking under the provisions of clause E675P1 and A1. Thank you.
Mr. Noy, the compliance has obviously been an issue. This has been taken further with section 63 of, that's the Lupa, isn't it?
Yes,
yeah.
That's correct.
And so there is obvious concerns for the neighbours, which and we've heard from Ms Ellison, Mr Mannon, and through the representations that this is an ongoing issue that's not being resolved. Is the compliance difficult from a council perspective to undertake?
I'll refer that to Ms Avey.
Thank you, Chair. The suggestion that the council's been on notice for 2 years and has done nothing it doesn't tally with our records. I've spoken to the manager of the compliance area today. We received a bundle of information in late May this year, which sets out a background of what is said to be a breach of the property, breach of the planning requirements for the property, and yes, enforcement action has been taken. It's also fair to say that process is still unfolding and it hasn't been completed. So it's a little bit preemptive to take that into account in a formal sense in this application.
Okay, and a subsequent question. So, is it difficult to undertake compliance when it comes to council on matters like this?
Well, it's difficult in the sense that I accept the comment that we're not there at 1 o'clock in the morning. You know, we are bound by office hours in that sense,
yep.
and so yes.
So that's when you're most likely to have problems with partying, isn't it?
Correct, and we do refer people to the police.
Yeah,
that's correct.
Yeah, okay. The fact that there are two properties owned by the same person, which could and sounds like they're being hired for visitor accommodation at the same time, is that kind of going around what the accommodation is meant to do, like going around rules in a way?
No. Yeah.
Oh, no, I don't believe so. There's no restriction on if somebody owns both properties in a strata development from both of those being used for visitor accommodation.
Right. Okay. Well, it might be a different sort of thing for neighbours, I suppose, if there's that, you know, so much more people there as guests who may move between the properties. It might be a different sort of situation. Just another question. If this were to be approved tonight, and it doesn't look like it, but is there any way to limit an application subject to the management plan being followed?
I mean, it's within your council's rights to impose a time limit on a permit. So if the council were of the mind to approve it, they could approve it for a period of time, you know, for a year or 6 months or whatever time frame that provides council with the opportunity, I suppose, for the applicant to demonstrate the bona fides around the management approach.
I see. So that could be argued in, you know, if it were to go to tribunal.
That's
or
right.
a limit given the previous history?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. So if there's no further discussion, I'll put the motion as moved by Alderman Briscoe for refusal. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried unanimously. Go now to item 7.1.1. Thank you very much for attending. 7.1.1 is application under the Sullivan's Cove Planning Scheme, 6 Montpellier Retreat, which is... and Alderman Barakis is leaving the room, so would you like to be co-opted, Councillor Fox?
I'll move to co-opt Councillor Fox.
Thank you. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Thank you, Councillor Fox. So it's 6 Montpellier Retreat. It's a application for change of use. Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you. Discussion.
Chair,
Councillor Hobart.
through you, Chair, to the Director. I'm assuming that the parking here will be used by the hotel that it adjoins.
The requirements are that it is for short stay visitor, short stay parking. It's short stay visitor accommodation. So it's for short term car parking. So it's not all day car parking.
So by short term, is that 1-2 hours? What's the limit?
Well, it's not all day.
Okay.
But we would envisage that it would be a turnover during the day.
And it's a private car park, and it will have a charge? None of our business.
One would imagine that being a commercial enterprise, that there would be a charge involved.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm just a bit unclear about the advantage of a car park. I think I'll support it tonight, but I'm just... I'd like to understand what our policy is with regard to additional car parking. Do we have a position that we would like to see more car parking, or ultimately, less car parking in time?
Yeah, look, I think the Sullivan's Cove Planning Scheme is fairly definitive so far as commuter car parking, long-term car parking is concerned. The scheme stipulates that type of car parking is not to be encouraged.
Mm.
The issue around short-term car parking arrangements, I think it's fair to say that given the nature of the precinct, there is expected to be some of that parking provided. Yeah, so that's where the scheme sort of sits.
Okay, because when I first looked at this, I just assumed it would have been parking for the hotel, long-term parking rather than short-term. If it had been proposed as long-term parking, would it have received approval?
No, definitely not. The scheme is fairly clear in terms of the policy position around commuter-type parking, that it's not to be encouraged within the cove.
So what about after hours? I'm just thinking, look, I don't actually think it would be bad to have, cars off the streets who are staying there overnight.
Not necessarily talking about the hotel, but anyway.
No,
I don't understand the advantage of this car park.
Yeah. So it's not to say that it couldn't be used for the hotel use, but it could be used, it should be used for short-term parking during the day, and if they wanted to use it for, as we do with some of council's own car parking spaces for hotels, for use for hotel customers to park overnight, for example. So,
okay, all right, so it's not short-term 24/7, it's...
Yeah.
Okay, so because I think, thanks Chair, I think there's an advantage of those using that for overnight parking, so I'll support this tonight, but generally I'm not a fan of additional car parking, but for this one, yeah.
Any further questions or comments? Mr Noy, just in relation to pedestrians using the space, is there a clear position of where they come out? Like, is that clearly demarcated? I'm just thinking about safety of both pedestrians on the footpath and
Yeah, I mean, in terms of site distance, there are conditions required in relation to that. It is a small car park, 14 spaces, so that they would, so it's not a heavily utilised space, low speed environment, so one would imagine that they're coming out the door in which is used. It's it's a 6 metre frontage. And there is conditions requiring further information in relation to that.
Oh, good. All right. Yep. Okay. And is this a one-storey or two-storey building?
Very good question, Chair. I believe it's two-storey.
Yeah. So conversion of ground floor, which is currently used as retail, into a car park. Do you know what's happening upstairs?
I don't think it relates to the upstairs component, Chair, but Ms Obi? No. No. So there's no change of use for the upstairs, but I can't tell you what the use is, Chair.
Okay. So it was quite clear in the documents that it, was unclear in the traffic impact assessment that it was, it seemed to have contradictory information in relation to short-term versus long-term, and the number of car parks and the size of car parks and so forth. How will compliance be checked in relation to this being used as short-term car parking?
Yeah, look, I think, well, in terms of short-term car parking, it needs to be, I mean, you can check for those sorts of things. Obviously, it's not parked out all the time. There would be car movements occurring on a regular basis. If that's not occurring, then we will be asking the questions.
And can we have is there any sort of limit on time for this to remain as a car park? I mean, it's
not an insignificant investment, Chair. So, and there's no proposal to impose a time limit as compared to my answer on the previous application. No.
Okay, all right. Councillor Coates, then Councillor Harvey.
Look, just very quickly, responding to a representation received, just want to confirm, keeping in mind that, do you have any concerns in regards to potential for damage with any excavation? And do you think the conditions as recommended to us by your officers, I mean, obviously I'm just reading All Urban Planning's representation, just want to make sure that you're comfortable as a director that the building and permit conditions are such that it will ameliorate any potential damage to surrounding properties?
Yeah. Look, I mean, there are protections around that under the Building Act, but also with condition environmental S1, which talks about management plan generally consistent with the Australian standards for guide to noise and vibration control on construction, demolition and maintenance sites. So there are, it's fair to say we have a little bit of history and understanding of excavation proposals within this vicinity, and the issues raised by the representor are valid and legitimate concerns, and ones that we've conditioned appropriately.
Thank you.
Councillor Harvey?
Yeah, 2 points. One, 15-minute car park is being removed, and is there a cost of that to council? And the second question is, if it's short-term parking, how do you enforce that? Do we enforce parking inside the building, or it's up to the owners to enforce it?
Well, look, there's no proposal for us to enforce that at this stage. That may be a proposition that put to us as a car parking enforcement agency, but no, there's no suggestion that council officers would be enforcing that on a day-to-day basis. What we would be enforcing is the conditions of approval, which stipulate that it is required to be for short-term parking, not for commuter long-term parking arrangements.
Okay, and that park at the front, that on 15-minute parking,
Yep,
that's not metered?
I suspect it is, Chair. So that's a loss of revenue to the council, but it's not a matter that we can necessarily argue against. People have a right to access their property, and so by a crossover. So it's not something, and you know, we might be losing one car parking space, but there are 14 spaces being provided. Okay, we're not getting the revenue, but that's not a factor for us under this application.
Councillor Dutton?
Yeah, been asked already. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, I think today we're approving more spaces for car parks than housing, but anyway, so I'll put the motion as moved by Alderman Briscoe. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Items carried unanimously. Can we get Alderman Barakis back, please? He should be coming back, Rach. Not the panic button.
No.
All right, so the next one is 7.2.2, 18 Grosvenor Street, Sandy Bay. So we're back to the City of Hobart interim planning schemes for change of use to visitor accommodation. Anybody move that? Councillor Coates, thank you. Discussion? Is there any discussion? Councillor Dutton?
Yeah, Chair, I think it's in my view that it does not comply with E661P with regards to the car parking space. And I drove there today, and the parking is pretty heavy all around the university and the roads alongside. And so it's for me, you know, it's a concern, and I would not support this. Thank you.
So are you foreshadowing?
I will foreshadow that a refusal.
Further discussion on the motion for approval. Alderman Barakis?
If there's a foreshadowed motion, I'll move the recommendation.
Oh, we've already got a live motion.
Sorry. Look, contrary to the previous item, I think this one is compliant. I noticed that it doesn't have any recommendations. Just the wording on it doesn't say that it was called in by an elected member. It says it's a category of application that was called in by an elected member. Does that imply that we've now got a blanket rule for short stay applications?
Through you, Chair, no, it has been called in. But
Individually.
Well, it's not a blanket call-in, but it's a call-in on a section of this type of application.
Mm-hmm. So what does that mean exactly?
It means, yes, it means that under certain circumstances, applications that don't meet certain standards have been called in.
So that would mean any applications that might trigger a certain discretion.
That's right.
Right. Okay. Right. Look, I won't push that any further. I think different to, as I just said, different to the previous item or the previous short stay application item. I think this one is one that does fit in with the performance criteria, which we do have to assess it against today. And unlike the previous item, I don't think that the speculation of potential impact on or likely impact on neighbouring properties is a reasonable one. So I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation here, not the foreshadowed motion. But I suppose we'll see how this goes. It seems to be Groundhog Day again, Chair.
Thank you. Alderman Briscoe.
Just a question, Chair, through you to Director. Do we know what how the surrounding, because it's conjoined colonial cottages or colonial whatever, do we know whether any of them have already got visitor accommodation status? You don't know whether they have or not.
But we can check.
Could you check that before the?
Yeah.
I think the clear thing here is that there's no representations against even from the tenants' union or whatever, or whoever. This one, it's good to see. I heard a member of this committee talk about the parking problem with the university, which is interesting in itself. But this is a 77 square metre small conjoined house. You're not going to. It's not going to be a party house. It's probably got one bedroom, unless we've got the plan somewhere.
The plans are in the report.
Is it one bedroom?
It's upstairs bedroom. Yep.
Yeah, one bedroom. So it'll be either a couple or one person. It's not going to be a party house. So I think I agree with. I do agree with Alderman Barakis. This is not a case of the one we've just considered. This is not the case that we've considered. Having no representations demonstrates to me that the neighbours are relatively, are comfortable that, for this to be visitor accommodation. It is in a good site, it's close to amenities. Yep.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the motion as moved by Councillor Coates. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? No. Show of hands. Those in favour?
Alderman Barakis, Councillor Coates,
Those against?
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Duffer, and the Deputy Lord Mayor.
So the motion is tied, the motion is lost. We have a foreshadowed motion from Councillor Dutta. Everybody's aware of that, so I'll put that. Those
under appropriate
with the
reasons.
Yes. Yeah, appropriate reasons. Those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Those against?
Aye.
Show of hands. Those in favour?
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Duffer, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Those against?
Alderman Briscoe, Alderman Barakis, and Councillor Coates.
The motion is lost. It will go to full council for a decision. Thank you.
Is that correct, or it goes to the Director?
No, it goes to full council.
Refusal.
We have plenty of time to consider it. Unlike some of the other ones that we didn't have enough time, but that's not in this situation. So we go to 7.2.3, 110 Regent Street, Sandy Bay. Can I have somebody move that, please? Councillor Harvey, thank you. Discussion? No discussion. I'll put that. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried. Now, 8.1 is the reports, and Ms Hogue, would you like to come to the table? So thank you for your...
And Brian Pearson.
And Mr Pearson, thank you. So you're the authors of the report, thank you, and I think it's comprehensive and well, responds essentially that you've received those representations from the public and feel that it still holds up as the amendment to send off to the Tasmanian Planning Commission. Any questions for Ms Hogue? I hope there are some questions. I had some questions. I've got to find them now. I was expecting more questions from others. So if when this does go to the Tasmanian Planning Commission, is it how long is that likely to take as part of the process? Because it goes on exhibition again, or you know is open for questions.
Chair, it doesn't actually go on exhibition again. The Commission has statutory timeframes. They've got 3 months in which to determine it, and in there, obviously they can. There are provisions in the Act that can be extended, but that's with the approval of the Minister. The Commission must hold hearings into representations. They don't do
Hearings.
another exhibition,
Yep,
but they
okay.
must hold a hearing into the representations.
Okay, so that's
Chair.
a statutory time period. Yep, and I'll just ask one other question. We didn't, so the initial, what was presented to us was to not have ancillary dwellings. Can you just explain that some further as to why ancillary dwellings were not considered?
Excuse me, Chair, just so the original was not to prohibit visitor accommodation in an ancillary dwelling. It's only full dwellings. That's correct, yes. The reason was that I'm just trying to think back myself. It was seen, so the policy position came last year from the council and consideration of the issues with long-term rentals. An ancillary dwelling is almost akin to letting out part of the house because it has to be part of the dwelling, and it's actually serviced the same as the dwelling and it's rated the same as the dwelling. And so that's why it's considered to be part of a dwelling where people are living there as well.
Yep.
I hope I've explained that well. Yeah.
And ancillary dwellings are limited in size, I think.
And they're limited to 60 square metres, yeah, as well. So it's not dissimilar to that exemption that allows you to use part of the house for visitor accommodation.
But isn't, just subsequent question, but isn't the idea of supporting ancillary dwellings for us, for both the council to do, but also the state government to do that as a for long-term accommodation?
Look, yeah,
Sorry, I didn't fully understand the question.
Yeah. Sorry, I may. Yeah. Look, yes, they are dwellings. So the issue around loss of those dwellings is potentially a concern, and it's within council's ability to raise that as an issue as part of that as part of this process.
Yep.
For example, you could seek to even prohibit ancillary dwellings in residential areas.
Okay. As short stay accommodation.
As short stay
Yep.
accommodation.
Okay. I hope that answer helped.
I understand now.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
so it would be possible to extend the prohibition to ancillary dwellings as well. It would be possible if you wanted to do that as a policy position, but the policy position that was looked at last year was treating the ancillary dwelling as part of the dwelling, essentially.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that.
Could I just have
Briscoe.
through your chair, would natural justice, if we change that now, we haven't advertised or sought submissions on that. Would that be against natural justice? If we say, for example, if someone amended this to include auxiliary dwellings, wouldn't that be against natural justice that people haven't had a chance to put in the submission? It would be a new application. I mean, certainly people could put a new amendment in, but that would have to go to public consultation. But you couldn't do this now, could you?
Through you, Chair, it is possible for the council to have a resolution that they advise the Commission that the council would like to extend it to ancillary dwellings. The process from there is the Commission has broad powers of investigation, that the Commission, if somebody who heard about it went to the Commission and said, there's a couple of steps, and said that they wanted to be heard because natural justice reasons, they didn't have an opportunity to make a submission through this process, the Commission has the power to hear them and involve them in the hearing process and the decision-making process. If the Commission, say, was also supportive of extending it, the Commission also has the power to say that's a substantial alteration to the amendment that originally went to it, and they can put that out again for exhibition. There's a couple of steps that they can use.
But whatever way, it would be fairly complicated. It wouldn't be.
It would extend the time if it became a substantial alteration. Yes, it certainly would. The other thing too is, at this stage with this report, you are addressing the representations. So usually if there is a change, it's in direct response to something raised in representations.
Thank you.
Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, through you, Chair. A number of the representations, I scanned through most of them, but if you could just confirm that quite a number of them were from short stay accommodation owners who appeared to already have permits. So it kind of confused me that why people would be arguing when they've already got a permit. Is that the case? Did you find that? Because you probably read the submission better than I did.
Mr. Pearson?
Hello, can you hear me? I think what it was, somebody did identify as part of their submission that they'd received an email from Airbnb asking them to provide a response to the proposed amendment.
But there was quite a substantial number of those, as I recall, and a lot of them were saying, well, we don't support it, even though we still have our own permit.
That's correct. I mean, there was a little bit of misinformation as well around the fact that we were banning Airbnb.
Yeah.
But I don't know the exact detail of the email that was given to those Airbnb property
But we don't have a
owners.
copy of that email.
A lot of it was outside of Hobart local government area as well from the responses, from what I gleaned. Okay, further comments or questions? Oh, sorry, Alderman Barakis, then Councillor Coates.
Thank you.
Councillor Dutton.
Thank you, Chair. And I've got a couple of questions just about the report. Just for starters, in the response to the comment on the City of Hobart social inclusion dashboards, it's referenced that in regards to the state government compiled short stay data, that the most recent data collection was Q3 2021. I checked that upon reading it, and we've got data from Q1 this year. So I'm just curious as to when this report was written, because it's about 2 quarters out of date.
Yeah, that was the latest report I could actually find on the state government website at the time. This report was drafted in probably early June, just to meet the deadlines for getting to late May, probably early June, to meet the deadlines to get to this committee meeting.
Right. Yeah, and just another question in regards to this data. I remember in 2019, during, around and after the housing summit that I think everybody here was involved in, there was calls for, and this council supported calls for, the state government to require data sharing from short stay providers with the state government, and that's collected through CBOS, as everybody I'm sure is aware. Given that we supported that, I haven't had it properly explained to me why. I know the UTAS reports, I know other places that have provided submissions and reports to this council, but this council itself has chosen not to use that information and to get data from third-party sources.
Is that a question for you, Mr. Norman?
Oh, a question for whoever can answer it, Chair.
Yeah. Look, it's valid question. I mean, the data is, as I understand it, is not perfect and a little difficult to disseminate. Is what advising me.
Right, but does the data that we're scraping or we're getting scraped for us will differentiate between the whole home listings that we are considering tonight and other listings?
Well, I don't think we're necessarily scraping.
We're not, but...
No. But the other parties may well be. So, I mean, that's a question for the other parties. But
I suppose the question is, does it differentiate between whole home listings and the part, the temporary, I've gone on a holiday, rented my place out, or I've got a ancillary dwelling or downstairs area that I'm renting
Mr.
out?
Noy?
Yeah, look, I'm not sure on that, and I don't know whether the other officers can. I think that there has been some attempt to differentiate between that, because that is a valid criticism.
Because
Valid criticism.
Because my
I think we'd have to take that on notice. Yeah.
If you take that on notice, can that answer be provided prior to Monday night, or next Monday night? I've got a couple more just on that. But I suppose the state government data does only include the ones that require a permit. Is that correct?
I'm not sure on that. No.
That's my understanding. I'm happy to be corrected, but I'd like to to know that. But on page 317, in one of the responses, we're quoting the university report regulating short stay accommodation in Tasmania, which is our conservative estimate is that between 2016 and 2018, short stay accommodation growth contributed to a loss of about 393 residential dwellings in the Hobart LGA, and 667 dwellings in Greater Hobart. This is about 5.6% of the Hobart LGA rental market. So the latest stats that I could find, which was the Q1 2022 stats, official stats, say that there is, and I'll get it here, 436 dwellings or listings. Is the implication here that since 2018 we've got 430 430, what's the number there? We've got effectively got less than 50 new applications, or less than 50 new permitted dwellings, because that seems to be what that's implying.
Ms. Hogue?
Just seems to me that statement doesn't jive with fact.
So through you, Chair, I understand you're saying in the submission it said there, and that was the university data, there were 393 dwellings, and then Q1 of 2022, which we've established we didn't have access to before this report. Yeah. That's the latest one. You're saying there's 436 dwellings?
That's what, yep.
So that means that there'd be,
I'll get the...
yeah, about 39.
430...
About 40.
Minus 300 and...
Yeah.
So what did we say? 393?
43 approved.
Since 2018?
2018.
But a number of those original ones could have gone out of the system and been replaced by new applications.
But the implication is still that the net increase has been 43?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any further questions, Alderman Barakis?
I'm sure I'll have more, but not at this time, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Dutta.
Just a follow-up from that data issue. There is also mentioned in the report that the social inclusion of the dashboard information from a third source is a bit misleading. Would you explain that? Is that true? Is that accurate?
The social inclusion dashboard is the City of Hobart's social inclusion dashboard. The data they source is via all the rooms. That's just what it says on the city's website.
Okay. Just one more question that I have is with regards to the property owner rights. Now, will this infringe on the property owner rights if you go down this path with the recommendation and the amendment?
I think that probably the answer to that question is that the planning scheme sets out different requirements for different land uses in different parts of the city. So property owner rights might be, it depends where your property is and what zone you're in, really. You can't just do whatever you want. That's a land use planning system.
Yes, but I think the question is for existing permit holders.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah.
For existing permit holders, no, if provided they maintain the use, then they have existing use rights and can continue to operate.
Thank you.
Councillor Harvey?
I was just going to move the item, Chair, for approval, as per the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Just a question, I'll get you in a moment, Alderman Briscoe, but just a question in relation to those statistics that Alderman Barakis was speaking about. Are they self-selected data? Like, how does the state government put that together?
Chair, there's an act that requires them to report through to CBOS if they're conducting visitor accommodation.
Okay, so it's required, it's enacted, so
Yes,
it's required.
yes.
Okay.
Yep. But as Mr. Noy said, I do believe there's issues with the quality of the data.
Right, okay. All right, thank you. Alderman Briscoe, then Alderman Barakis.
Yes, well, I'm going to support the motion. I think it's been moved, has it? So I'm going to support it. Whether it achieves what it sets out to do, I have really serious concerns. Why I'm supporting it is because I do think there is an element of the short stay whole house that is affecting the market, whether it is the most significant part of the rental market or the whole homes problem we have in Hobart. I'm not convinced, but I'd rather it to be considered by the Planning Commission, and where they will have access to experts who make submissions, and I think it's worth testing it. There are other ways, I'm sure, that we could have controlled the growth of short stay whole houses, such as density limits, which is a long-term planning matter. I don't think that this in itself, it's got great intentions, but I don't think, in my view, and it's not it is my opinion, that it won't have a great effect. I will be asking a question in questions without notice that might be allude to a greater effect than short stay accommodation, but I am supporting it because I think in a way it sends a message that the council is worried about it, worried about lack of affordable accommodation in Hobart, and I support that, and anything I can do to help that. Whether in fact the good intentions will be reflected in the performance of our good intentions, that's what I have doubts about, but I am going to support it.
Thank you. Alderman Barakis.
Thank you. Just a couple more questions, then I'll comment. There was, it's been said a couple of times tonight, and it's been said in the past that there's shortcomings in the state government data. Can you elaborate on what the shortcomings are? Because if we've called on the state government to collect this data, the state government's required short stay providers to provide this data. If there's a shortcoming in the data that was compiled for the purpose of effectively this for policy setting, it'd be critical to know what the shortcomings of that are so they can be rectified.
Oh.
You want to use that other microphone, so you know, and just make sure that you're talking in so that the folks at home can hear. That's great. Thank you. No, it's on. It's on.
Okay.
Yeah.
The wording about the data quality comes from the state government's website. When I sourced it, it said, as a quote, "As highlighted above, reports have included data that is not required under the Act, and issues regarding data quality remain. Data quality will improve as the reporting requirements and data collection processes become part of the platform's business processes and reporting is refined over time."
Further questions, Alderman Barakis?
Right, but it doesn't say what the actual shortcomings were.
Oh no, but yeah.
An admission by the
I've just
state
read it
government of the
verbatim.
shortcomings.
Okay. Well, I suppose it might trigger some questions down the road then. And just another question. I know it was said that it was misleading or perhaps to be a bit more forgiving, misinterpreting the proposed amendments by saying this is a ban. Effectively, if you don't already have a short stay accommodation, this is a ban. It's a ban on new permits being issued. Is that not correct?
Only in certain zones. Like there are restrictions on other land uses in zones across the city.
Look, Chair, given I've got some misgivings about the data being used and how the data is being used and what the actual take homes of that data, I do have some concerns about this. I know that we do have a large number of people that have made representations against this, and Councillor Harvey is correct in making the point that if they were being self-interested in their representations, they'd be supporting it, because I think anybody who currently has a short stay permit will laugh all the way to the bank if these changes are implemented. And so it must be that they've got other reasons for making these representations, such as a genuinely held belief that this isn't the right way of going about it. I don't think that short stay accommodation is the boogeyman that some are making it out to be. I do think it is clear though that they do pay. There is a factor, and there is an effect that they're having in the housing market. I would have supported tighter regulating of the short stay market. I think we could have done this in a much more sophisticated way. I don't think this is the right way to go about it. It's a sledgehammer to the entire sector, which some are saying is a good thing. I don't think it is the best way to address this issue. And ultimately, as Alderman Briscoe said, and I fundamentally agree with him right up until him saying he's going to vote for it anyway. Ultimately, this isn't going to open up any new homes for rental. Many of the homes, including ones that were coming up for us today, you're talking mansions with 4 or 5 bedrooms, aren't relevant to the housing affordability conversation. And ultimately, it's not, for all of the good intention, it's not going to open up another house for use. And I think there is the issue of property rights of property owners. But that's not to say that there can't be good common sense regulations. I just don't think this is it. I just hope, and I'm sure given the conversations around the chamber today, this does look likely that it's going to pass through tonight, and I would be, I might risk preempting the council and saying that it's likely to pass council next week. I hope that with that done and with it sent off to the Planning Commission, we can put this issue to bed, and we can turn our focus to issues that might actually have a greater impact on housing affordability, levers that we can pull, such as getting more houses built, such as making the input costs of housing in our city lower, which we can do, we can directly do, and I think that would have much more of an effect than what we're talking about tonight. So hopefully we can get through this issue and we can turn our focus to more matters that are more under our control. So, Chair, I'll leave it there. I won't be supporting the item before us.
Councillor Coates?
Thank you, Chair. Look, I also find myself not supporting the item before us and recommendations. Look, ultimately, I just don't agree with the path that this proceeds down. I won't go into sort of every single exhaustive detail, but I think when it comes to public policy and trying to get good outcomes, we've got to try and avoid policies that result in very clear sort of winners and losers. And I think, unfortunately, although well-intentioned, if we go down this path, it just creates a set of winners. I mean, to my mind, this is stomping on a little guy to create a big winner. I mean, I'm surprised I can't hear the cheers from the Federal Group boardroom right now. I mean, all their hotels become more valuable, there's less competition. Yes, the intention is to try and get more housing supply into the long-term rental market. I think the ultimate solution to that is to get more housing supply into the long-term rental market, actually building the housing supply. I think all this, although well-intentioned, will do is create less competition amongst the sort of hotel industry and, you know, ironically create a set of real winners who already have the permits, reduce the competition for the accommodation short-term sector, and ultimately I just think, just purely based on the raw numbers, although it might have result in some being on the long-term market that otherwise may not have, I don't think it's going to be enough to necessarily move the needle. I also fear that potentially all that will happen is those ones will just move into other municipalities and other areas. So it'll just be a shifting, and I guess from a rental market perspective, it doesn't necessarily stop at the borders. But look, I guess also from a pure due process point of view, the whole point of going out to public consultation is to try and get a sense of what the community's thoughts are around this. And admittedly, not all representations are necessarily equal, but when we get back that we've got 70 opposing it and only 48 in favour, I have real concerns about what did we even go out for consultation for? And look, it's been noted already in discussions that some of the people making representations against this potentially are going to benefit. But, you know, I think a lot of people actually have, you know, they've got good hearts, good souls, and they themselves would have a sense that that's not fair. That they would have a permit and a right to their property that someone else wouldn't have. And look, at the start I mentioned it creates a set of real winners, and I stand by that. This isn't good policy. I think there are concerns and issues around availability of housing. There are concerns and issues around the management of short-term accommodation as city. And look, while we debate this one now, just immediately before, in this very meeting, we had a discussion about someone who was, you know, breaking the rules. You know, we could ban these and they're still going to be happening, it's just going to be driven underground. And look, I just think this is a sledgehammer where perhaps a scalpel would be more appropriate. I think it's a bad policy. It rewards the big end of town at the expense of the small end of town. It creates a real set of this golden set of properties who now, they are never going to be moved out of the short-term accommodation market, because to do so means they would lose their permit, and that'll have significant commercial value presumably. And I'm not even convinced that there necessarily is the huge community concern about it, because when we went out for public consultation, we didn't get an overwhelming majority coming back in favour of it. So look, I don't think this is the right way to go. I think there are other avenues that we should look at. We should potentially look at differential of rates. We should potentially look at management plan. We should potentially look at you know, stuff within the city and distance from the city and density limits and where these exist. But to put in a submission to the Planning Commission saying that we would support a blanket ban, I just think is way too much of a sledgehammer. Look, I just don't think it's based on, I think it's based more on a sort of ideological hope that it will result in a huge benefit to the long-term rental market. But I think it will have a lot of very, very poor public policy outcomes, and so look, I'm not supportive of it.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the work that you've done in distilling the comments. We've had comments from various organisations, peak bodies, National Shelter, Shelter Tasmania, the Salvation Army, TasCos, Tenants Union, Catholic Care, Ella Haddad, many residents who brought up their concerns, but I think those peak bodies have been looking at this issue for a long time. I might remind Councillor Coates in particular that this, I think it was a suggestion by the Planning Minister at the time in relation to putting something together as to the Tasmanian Planning Commission for a planning scheme amendment. So it's actually somebody in the state government who suggested we do this. And tonight what we're considering is that distillation of the information that has come back. If there are amazing things that would change our position, then we might change our position. I think that there is some thought around how we control ancillary dwellings, which may have been omitted, but it's certainly been brought up by some of the representations. Of course, there will be that chance for others to be heard when it does go to the Planning Commission. So really appreciate the professionalism and the work that you've done to date on this, Ms Hogue and Mr Pearson. And I think it has been moved by Councillor Harvey. So if there's no further discussion, Councillor Dutta, you wanted to say something?
Just two questions with regards to what was said. I just want a clarification on this. With regards to the submissions that were received, the fact that there were only 48 in support and 70 against, does that in any way sway the position of the staff? Is question one. And question number two is this, the staff, do they take on ideological positions to make a recommendation, or do they look at it neutrally? In that context, I just want clarification.
The number of it comes down to the substance of the representations, not the number. And in terms of ideology, no, it is based on planning principles that we assess these matters on.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye. Aye.
Those against? Aye. Show of hands. Those in favour?
In favour? We're all confused tonight.
Alderman Briscoe, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Those against?
Brakes and Councillor Coates.
Shouldn't have said anything.
So that's carried, and it will go to full council tomorrow. Thank you very much for being here to answer questions. Now, 8.2, Councillor Fox would be interested, no doubt, in this one. So this is the assessment of the planning applications with heritage and disability access issues. Very good. I'll open it up for discussion. Do you want to say something, Councillor Fox, since you're here?
I'm just really glad that the recommendations come through. I think this one should be pretty straightforward and hopefully doesn't meet with any resistance. It's a pretty sensible recommendation. So thanks to the staff for doing that work on it.
Thank you. Alderman Baracus?
I'm happy to move that,
Thank you.
Chair. I think we all supported this when it was suggested. I think it's a fantastic suggestion. Just as far as the way that the recommendation's worded, so what's the mechanical process from here to get these suggestions implemented?
Mr Noy?
Yeah, so just maybe.
Yeah. Through you, Chair, there's currently a review of the state planning provisions. Those aren't applicable to us at the moment until we have our local provision schedule finalised. But nevertheless, we are going to participate in that process because we have some issues to raise, and it's proposed that this is added into that bundle of issues, and that would ensure that if the SPPs were altered, then that would apply statewide.
Yeah, sorry, I've got a little bit further. It's come back to me now. But in fact, there is a scoping feedback on the scope of this review is feedback on that is being pursued by the state government at the moment, and we hope to have a report to committee, I think on the 27th, the next committee meeting, which I think is a three-week round, so the 27th. So we'll.
Sorry, is that feedback on the SPPs or feedback on this?
No, it's feedback on the SPPs and the scope of that review.
Okay.
Of which this will be raised as a matter we might like to raise as part of that scope.
That was going to be my next question: is what are the status of our what are we up to with our SPPs? So.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Apologies.
Sorry, a little bit there.
That was going to be my next question: is where are we with the SPPs? So I think
with the LPS.
LPS, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, the LPS. Yeah, so we've had further engagement with the TPC. So we, so the matter, as I understand it, is with the TPC and ourselves, because we have to amend our GIS to address some of the matters raised.
Stop the acronyms and stuff.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Geographical Information Systems.
Thank you.
GIS, and the TPC being the Tasmanian Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Sorry, I do rile against that
More
myself.
for the people out there.
I was going to agree. I think we might know what a lot of these acronyms are, but for the benefit of people listening, it might be a bit alphabet soup.
So, so it's likely to be advertised, the officer's view is around October.
Thank you. That's all from me, Chair.
Councillor Coates?
Thank you. Yeah, look, I'll also support this. It makes sense. It was it's noted, I think, in a report, this is the first instance. May not be the first instance, but first instance that we know about, or the officers know about, where this has happened. I guess I'd make the observation that in some ways the system as it is currently, weirdly enough, worked, because the system as it currently is allows discretion for us as elected members acting as a planning authority to ultimately weigh up between two conflicting bits of advice. One bit of advice based on building standards, access codes and rights to access a building, and the second one being heritage concerns. I would imagine that many times we will get recommendations on heritage that seem a little bit weird, a little bit strange, but ultimately, we charge heritage officers to assess the heritage value of something. And if it's got heritage value, the advice should always be, well, don't damage it. But for obvious reasons, this building being one, we've got an access ramp at the front. There are reasons why us as representatives of the community and community expectation is that you are able to alter, change and make additions. So look, to the extent that hopefully if this change goes through, poor applicants aren't put in a situation where they're told what they're proposing is not feasible, not possible, and then they get put in a horrible situation where what can you do with that building? But I guess I'd make the observation that I think the system, weirdly enough, sort of worked well. We used our discretion wisely, and I think we had a good outcome for the community in that instance. But it is quite possible that someone, upon receiving that advice, might just say, well, I can't go ahead with it and pull back, and that's a sort of a little bit of an unknown. But look, I find myself supporting it, and hopefully it leads to better outcomes.
Director, just in relation to, I know there have been situations where this was a lift, I know of another place which is a heritage building, and I think the applicants who wanted to put in a lift didn't end up doing so. How realistic is, I think they were lifts in both cases, but how realistic is this sort of change going to actually affect change, just given the restrictions in heritage?
Yeah. Well, look, it provides greater flexibility to accommodate those changes, to give greater weight to those needs.
Yep.
Over heritage, because there are, balances that we need to take from time to time around these matters, and so it's just providing the officers and elected members and proponents, I suppose, some greater flexibility to accommodate the reuse of those buildings and the important need for access for all.
Okay, and this is not a access issue per se, but it's an issue that often is drawn to my attention with the difficulty of getting solar panels on heritage buildings. Is this the vehicle to have that looked at as well, which is kind of a response to climate change or being self-sufficient? How would we look at affecting that kind of flexibility?
Yeah. Look, it might be a similar pathway, I suppose, for you. We tend to try and find alternatives under those circumstances, as we've done, as we normally do with heritage and access provisions, as we've done with this building. Councillor Coates made mention of, that we worked through and found a reasonable solution. So we do try and find solutions for these types of instances, and sometimes it's not always possible. And I
Right.
accept that. Yeah. But
maybe there's greater flexibility there.
Yes.
I'll think about that. Okay, so we have this motion that's moved by Alderman Barakis. Oh, what was it, Councillor Coates?
That was me.
All right, if there's no further discussion, I'll put that motion. Those in favour? Those against? Items carried. Item 8.3 is City Planning Advertising Report. Alderman Barakis, any comments or questions? Maybe.
Should not be councillor.
Promotion.
All right.
We haven't had a councillor since our Parks Director.
Yes, Roger Viney.
Roger Viney.
Who's the 13th Alderman.
Was Amy.
I'll draw the elected members' attention to an application at 42 Newdigate Street, which might not otherwise jump out at you. It's a corner cafe operated some slight distance back from the North Hobart main strip. There's a proposal to extend the hours to 9 p.m. on Friday and Saturday night, so that can be operated as a jazz function place. So that was the one.
That's likely to come to council.
Well, it's not. There's only one. There's 3 representations, but 2 of those are in support. So that would normally come to just be determined at officer level. Just
through you, Chair.
It's an interesting one.
Assuming that's for approval.
Well, that's right. It hasn't been correct. Okay. Yes.
That sort of bootlegs a little bit of straight.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I think Alderman Barakis moved that. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried. 8.4 is Delegated Decisions Report. Can I have somebody move that? Councillor Alderman Barakis, thank you. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried. Item 9 is responses to questions without notice, 9.1. Can I have somebody move that, please? Councillor Coates. Those in favour? Those against? Items carried. Questions without notice. I think Alderman Briscoe, you said you had one?
Yeah, look, yes, thank you, Chair. I've just got a one sentence introduction, and then I'll ask the question. It's come to my knowledge there are significant government-owned residential properties that have remained empty for more than 6 months in local government area Hobart. So the question, so due to the recent release, I think it was the last few days, of the recent census data, can the officers determine from that data how many empty residential properties that have been empty for more than 6 months in Hobart, local government area Hobart, and how many government residential properties are empty?
Government residential?
Yeah. In other words, they're owned by. I'm not ever quite sure whether it's owned by the housing department these days, or if it's owned by the government, like the state government. Yeah. So yeah, I think you get the.
Send that through.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, it's mainly because the recent census data has been released that you may be able to access it better. I've tried, but I can't get into that detail yet. But you may be able to.
We'll happy to take that question on
Thank you. Alderman Barakis, then Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've asked this question before, but it's just a status update. I know, and I'm pretty sure this is the right committee to ask it in. I know a little while ago there was a number of motions to identify council land that could be used for housing. One of those was Newtown / North Hobart, near where there was the netball courts or hockey. One of the, yeah. I was just wondering what the status of those are, if there are any, if there have been identified, or if there are any council property or council land that isn't being used that we could be working with state government, working with social housing providers to get some more housing in there.
Yeah, look, yeah, this has been this question has been asked. We have provided a response previously, but happy to provide a further update on that.
Thank you. Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Chair. I have a number of short questions. Question number 1. What is the total number of old DAs that Hobart City Council has approved in the period from November 2018 to 2022? That's question 1. Question number 2.
Hold on.
No, I have already, I think, made some reference, so I'll send it over.
Yeah, 2,613, Chair.
Oh.
November 2018.
What is the total number of all DAs that has Hobart City Council has approved in the period from November 2018 to June 2022?
And question number 2, what is the total number of all DAs rejected in the same period?
42. Chair.
And number 3, what is the total number of DAs for new residential projects approved in the same period?
Mr. Noy?
Total residential DAs is 1,650, but for new dwellings and new ancillary dwellings, DAs, we've had 334. So the 1,650 relate to extensions, modifications, that sort of thing. But so far as new dwellings and ancillary dwellings are concerned, that's 334.
Thank you. And number 4, what is the total number of DAs for new residential projects rejected in the same period?
Total residential DAs rejected are 18. Of those, only 7 involve new dwellings or ancillary.
Thank you. Number 5, what is the total number of DAs for commercial projects approved in the same period?
963. Sorry.
And number 6, what is the total number of DAs for commercial projects rejected for the same period?
24.
And the final question, of all DAs processed in this period, what percentage are determined by staff and what percentage are determined by council?
86.3% determined by staff, 4.1% determined by committee, and full council 9.6%.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll have a follow-up question. Do the number of development applications translate to how many development approvals actually translate to building approvals, like
No.
building permit sign-offs?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Alderman Barakis.
I also have some supplementary questions to that, to Councillor Dutta's questions. How many residential DAs have been approved and rejected in the period outlined by Councillor Dutta by elected members? So not by council title, but just the number by this chamber.
Yeah. Sorry, but yeah, I'll take that on notice.
you.
By this, sorry, when you say this chamber,
In the
by,
same-
by committee and or council.
By council,
Yeah, by
sorry,
council.
but in the same period.
Yep.
And then the second question is, because I know the question was asked about how many residential DAs have been rejected by this council. How many dwellings does that total up to? Thank you.
Councillor Coates.
Look, thank you, Chair. I think it's, I wasn't going to ask any question, but it's good questions. While the Director's doing a deep dive in the database, I'm just wondering, and it may not be possible, but obviously some developers, if they believe it's going to be rejected, may choose not to go ahead. I'm just wondering if you had any stats or idea as to how many get withdrawn because they don't believe they'll be able to get it through. Or you may not be able to, do you have any idea as to how many applications are progressed and then withdrawn?
Yeah, so it's, look, I'll take that on notice. So it's really the number of applications that are withdrawn. And there may be several reasons for that.
Yeah, perhaps the reasons can go with that as well.
Yeah.
So will the reasons be given?
Look, I'd need to take that
thank you.
question on notice because I need to investigate the database.
Thank you.
All right, Councillor Harvey.
Of those withdrawn, how many are resubmitted and subsequently passed? So we could this could go all night, you know.
Of course it
Yeah.
could. Maybe we have a workshop some other time about these vagaries of council and.
Did you get? Yeah, you did get it though. Yeah.
So you're going to take that one on notice?
Oh, yeah, well, clearly.
So that's the end of questions about notice. Can I have somebody move that we close this? Thank you, Alderman Baraka.